I grew up in a quiet town in Oregon. Life there always felt slow and peaceful. When I turned 21, I decided to move out and buy my first house. It was about 50 miles away from the town where I grew up. The house was small, but it felt like a huge step in my life. I was proud of it. Because it was my first place, I did not have much furniture. I got most of my things from my parents, their friends, and online marketplaces. I spent a lot of time looking through listings for cheap furniture and useful items. I drove a large pickup truck at the time, so picking up heavy things was easy for me. One day I found a listing that caught my attention. It looked like someone was selling many things at once, almost like a digital yard sale. Two items stood out to me right away. One was a cream-colored sectional couch that looked almost new. The other was a mountain bike. I had been thinking about getting a bike because the roads near my house were perfect for riding. I sent a message to the seller. The conversation was short and simple. The man answered my questions quickly and agreed to a slightly lower price. He told me I could come pick everything up later that evening. Summer days in Oregon are long, so I knew there would still be sunlight when I arrived. I assumed the couch would be too big to carry in one trip, but I was fine with making more than one drive. Before leaving, I checked the address on the map. The house was near the coast. The map showed a long driveway leading away from the road toward a large property. Behind the house was a cliff that dropped straight down to the ocean. I remember thinking the place must be beautiful. The drive there took less time than I expected. The closer I got to the coast, the nicer the houses looked. Large homes sat far back from the road, hidden behind trees. Eventually, I reached the road where the house was located. The road was long and quiet. Tall trees lined both sides. Every once in a while, I passed a driveway that disappeared into the woods toward large homes. Then I saw the driveway from the map. It was a dirt road that cut through a line of trees. I turned in and drove slowly forward. After a short distance, the trees opened into a wide clearing. At the top of a small hill sat a large house overlooking the ocean. The house looked expensive. I parked near an old sedan that sat in the driveway. The car looked out of place next to such a nice home. I walked up to the front door and noticed a yellow note taped beside the doorbell. The note said the doorbell was broken and asked visitors to use the back door instead. I thought it was strange. I could have just knocked on the door, but I followed the note anyway. As I walked along the side of the house, I sent the seller a message saying I had arrived and was heading to the back. The windows along the side of the house all had their blinds closed. When I reached the backyard, I stopped for a moment. The view was incredible. The house sat right above the ocean. The backyard ended at a cliff that dropped down toward the water. The sun was starting to set, and the light reflected across the waves. I walked onto the back deck and knocked on the sliding glass door. The blinds behind the glass were closed, so I could not see inside. I waited. Nothing happened. I knocked again and checked my phone. The seller had not opened my message. I sat down in a chair on the deck and turned it toward the ocean while I waited. The view was so peaceful that for a moment I forgot why I was there. After a few minutes, I stood up and walked closer to the edge of the property to look over the cliff. I even thought about taking a photo of the sunset. Then I turned around and began walking back toward the house. I stopped after a few steps. Something had changed. Every window in the house now had its blinds open, and at each window there was someone standing there. They were completely still. Each person stood behind the glass and faced toward the backyard. For a moment I thought they might be mannequins. They were not moving at all. I took a few careful steps closer. That was when I noticed their faces. Every one of them was smiling. The smiles looked wide and unnatural. A cold feeling ran through my chest. I did not understand what I was seeing, but something about it felt deeply wrong. I decided I needed to leave. I walked quickly along the side of the house toward the front yard. As I passed the side window that had been closed earlier, I noticed it was open now too. Another person stood there. They were also smiling. I reached my truck and got inside as fast as I could. I did not look toward the front windows. I did not want to see if more people were standing there. I put the truck in reverse and began backing down the driveway. At one point, curiosity got the better of me. I looked toward the house. The front door was open. A man stood on the porch watching me leave. His hands rested in his pockets. He did not move. I turned my eyes back to the road and kept driving until the house disappeared behind the trees. Once I reached the main road, I stopped at the nearest house and knocked on the door. I wanted to tell someone what I had just seen. The man who answered listened carefully as I explained everything. He seemed confused because he said the owner of the large house was a friend of his and was rarely there. He called the owner on his phone while I stood there. The owner answered and sounded surprised. He said he was not at the house that week. I described everything I saw, including the old sedan and the people standing at the windows. The owner sounded worried. He asked me to send him the listing and the profile that had contacted me. Later that night, he called again. The listing had already disappeared, and the profile was blank. The police checked the house, but they found nothing stolen. The car was gone, and the blinds were closed again. But one thing stayed with me. All 3 doors to the house were unlocked. I still think about the way those people stood at the windows, silent, still, smiling. And I often wonder why they wanted me to come around to the back of the house that night. I live with my parents in a quiet town in Pennsylvania. Our house sits near a stretch of woods that runs behind the backyard. The yard has an in-ground pool and a small pool house beside it. The woods start just past the grass and go back a long distance. No trails run through them, and no one ever walks there. The land behind our house is private and quiet. One weekend, my parents were away. I decided it would be a good time to invite some friends over for a small pool party. I do not get many chances to host anything at the house, so I was excited about it. The party was planned for Saturday night. Earlier that afternoon, I started setting things up outside. I carried folding tables into the yard and placed them near the pool. I wanted space for drinks and games. The sky was cloudy, but that did not matter because the party would happen after dark anyway. While I was carrying one of the tables across the grass, I heard something from the woods. It was a cough. It sounded like a slow, throat-clearing cough, the kind someone makes when something is stuck in their throat. The sound came from just inside the tree line. I stopped walking and held the table in my hands. The yard was quiet. The wind barely moved the leaves. The sound had been clear enough that I knew it came from a person. I slowly set the table down on the grass and stared toward the trees. No one should have been in those woods. I looked carefully along the tree line and called out to ask who was there. No one answered. The woods stayed completely still. There were no footsteps, no branches moving, nothing at all. The silence made me feel more uncomfortable than the sound itself. I had a strange feeling in my chest, like someone was standing just behind one of the trees and watching me without moving. I listened for a while longer but heard nothing else. After about half a minute, I decided I did not want to stay outside alone anymore. I carried the rest of the supplies back inside the house for the moment. Later, I asked my friend to come over early and help me finish setting up. I did not mention the cough because I did not want to sound paranoid before the party even started. He arrived in the evening and helped me move the tables and turn on the patio lights. While we worked outside, I kept glancing toward the woods. Everything looked normal. Nothing moved. Soon the rest of my friends began to arrive. By the time the party was in full swing, there were about 20 people in the backyard. Music played from speakers near the pool. Some people swam while others stood around talking and laughing. With that many people around, the woods no longer felt creepy. Still, a few times during the night, I caught myself looking toward the tree line without thinking. Something about that cough stayed in the back of my mind. Around midnight, the party started to slow down. One by one, people began leaving. By about 1 in the morning, the last guest had gone home. I was tired and decided to leave the cleanup for the next day. Before going inside, I walked around the yard one last time. I looked around the pool and behind the pool house. Then I looked toward the woods again. Everything looked normal. The water in the pool was calm and reflected the lights from the patio. The backyard was quiet. I locked the sliding door to the house and went upstairs to get ready for bed. I spent a little time on my phone before finally turning the screen off and lying down. After some time passed, I heard something outside. It was a splash. It sounded exactly like someone jumping into the pool. My eyes opened right away. I stayed still in bed and listened carefully. A moment later, I heard the sound of someone swimming. I could hear the water moving with steady strokes. At first, I thought someone from the party must have stayed behind as a joke. But the more I thought about it, the more that idea felt wrong. I got out of bed and walked slowly to the window that looked over the backyard. I kept the lights in my room turned off so whoever was outside would not see me. When I looked down at the pool, I saw a man swimming from one side to the other. The pool lights made the water glow, and I could see his face clearly enough to know one thing. I had never seen him before. I leaned closer to the window and called out, asking who he was. He stopped swimming. Slowly, he lifted his head and looked straight toward my window. He did not seem surprised at all. He simply stared at me. Then he moved toward the shallow end and climbed out of the pool. When he stood up, I saw how tall he was. Water ran down from his clothes and onto the ground. For a moment, he just stood there facing the house. Then he began walking toward the sliding door. He did not run. He walked quickly and directly, like he already knew where he was going. I shouted again and asked who he was. He did not answer. Then I heard something downstairs. The sliding door opened. I was sure I had locked it earlier, but I heard the door slide open and then shut again. My heart started racing. I rushed to my bedroom door and locked it. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone. I sent a quick message to my friend asking if anyone had stayed behind after the party, but I did not wait for a reply. I called the police and whispered that someone had broken into the house. While I spoke quietly into the phone, I heard footsteps downstairs. They sounded wet. Each step made a soft sticking noise on the floor as the man walked across the hardwood. He was not moving quickly. He walked slowly and calmly toward the staircase. Then I heard the stairs creak one step at a time. He was coming upstairs. My heart pounded so loudly that I thought he might hear it. When he reached the top of the stairs, the hallway floor creaked outside my room. Then everything went silent. He had stopped right outside my bedroom door. I could hear water dripping onto the floor. The door handle moved. He tried to open the door once, then again, then a third time, harder. When it did not open, he paused. For a long moment, there was no sound at all. Then he knocked on the door. 3 slow knocks. I picked up the phone and spoke loudly, saying that the police were on their way. There was another pause. Then a man's voice spoke from the other side of the door. He spoke quietly and calmly and told me to open the door. I told him I did not know him and that he needed to leave. The hallway stayed silent again. After a few seconds, I heard him turn and walk away. His wet footsteps moved down the hallway and back down the stairs. Then I heard the front door open and slam shut. I stayed in my room until the police arrived. When they finally came inside, we walked through the house together. There was a clear trail of water on the floor leading from the back door to the stairs and all the way up to my bedroom door. That trail was the only sign that the man had ever been there. Later, I asked every person who had been at the party if they had seen anyone strange. No one had. Everyone confirmed that they had left when the party ended. The man was a complete stranger. I still believe the cough I heard earlier that day in the woods came from him. Sometimes I wonder if he had been watching the house long before the party even started. And sometimes I think about what might have happened if I had opened that bedroom door. I grew up with 2 brothers. I was the middle one. My older brother and my younger brother were both involved in scouts when we were kids. I remember watching my older brother prepare for his camping trips many times. He would practice setting up a tent in the backyard, packing his gear, and getting ready for weekends in the woods. I always watched from the side. I was not part of the scouts, but I wished I was. The camping trips looked exciting to me. One night when I was about 8 years old, I had an idea. I wanted to try camping in our backyard. I asked my parents if I could sleep in the tent with my older brother. They thought it was a fun idea. Our backyard was large and quiet, surrounded by patches of trees and bushes that separated the yards in our neighborhood. It felt a little like being in the woods. My parents helped us set up the tent near the fire pit. We made a small fire and roasted marshmallows. The evening felt special to me. I felt proud because I was finally getting a small version of the camping experience I had always watched my brother enjoy. My younger brother sat with us for a while, but he was too young to sleep outside. My parents took him back into the house once it got dark. Soon it was just me and my older brother in the tent. We climbed inside our sleeping bags. I remember playing a game on my handheld console for a while before trying to sleep. The tent was quiet except for the sound of the night air outside. I thought it would be easy to fall asleep, but it was not. The sleeping bag felt strange and uncomfortable. The ground felt hard under me. I rolled around for a long time. Eventually, I fell asleep. When I woke up again, it was very dark. For a moment, I did not remember where I was. The inside of the tent looked different in the night. The shapes felt strange and unfamiliar. Then I realized something else. My brother was gone. His sleeping bag was empty. The zipper of the tent was still closed. I assumed he must have gone back inside the house because he could not sleep. The thought of being alone outside suddenly made me feel scared. I slowly sat up. I moved toward the zipper and opened it just a little so I could peek outside. I wanted to check the yard before stepping out. When I looked outside, I saw someone sitting near the fire pit. It was not my brother. It was not my dad. It was a grown man sitting in the dark. He was facing the tent. I froze the moment I saw him. I quickly pulled the zipper closed again and crawled back into my sleeping bag. My heart was beating fast. The inside of the tent felt small and thin. I stayed completely still and tried not to make any sound. I hoped the man had not seen me. For a moment there was silence. Then I heard movement outside. The chair near the fire pit shifted. My body felt stiff with fear. I stayed inside the sleeping bag and did not move at all. I stared at the wall of the tent, watching the faint gray light from the moon outside. Then a shadow appeared on the tent wall. The shadow moved slowly. It stopped right outside. I knew the man was standing there. I held my breath. I hoped he would think the tent was empty. I hoped he would leave. Then I heard the zipper. It moved very slowly. The sound was quiet but clear. The zipper slid down only a few inches. A small opening appeared near the bottom. I turned my head just slightly. Near the bottom of the tent there was a tiny gap where the zipper did not fully close. I had never noticed it before. An eye appeared in that gap. It was pressed close against the fabric. I could see the white of it in the darkness. The eye was staring directly at me. For a few seconds I could not move or make any sound. My body felt frozen. Then the eye narrowed slightly as if the man outside was smiling. The zipper moved a little more. That was when I finally screamed. I kicked out of the sleeping bag and scrambled backward. My movements shook the tent poles and the fabric collapsed around me. I heard fast footsteps outside running across the yard. A bright light suddenly turned on from the back porch. I heard the back door open. My father ran outside. His voice filled the yard as he shouted into the darkness. I stayed inside the fallen tent, shaking and crying. By the time my father reached the fire pit, the man was already gone. My parents called the police that night. I remember sitting inside the house wrapped in a blanket while everything happened around me. The officers searched the area and spoke with my parents. I barely understood what was happening. I only knew that someone had been outside my tent watching me. That night I slept in my parents' room. For a long time after that, I felt scared whenever it got dark. A few weeks later, something happened that made the memory even worse. I was at school during lunch recess. Our schoolyard was surrounded by a fence that faced the street. I was playing with other kids and ran toward the fence during the game. While I stood there catching my breath, a man spoke from the other side. I turned toward the voice. A man was standing outside the fence looking directly at me. He asked me for directions to somewhere nearby. I told him I did not know. Then he said my name. My stomach dropped when I heard it. He asked if I remembered him. Something about his voice and the way he looked at me made my chest feel tight with fear. I said no. Then I ran toward one of the teachers on the playground. When I looked back toward the fence, the man was gone. The school called my parents, and I went home early that day. I always believed it was the same man from the backyard. After that, My parents watched me very closely for months. Eventually, life returned to normal, but the memory never left me. Even now, when I think about that night in the tent, I remember the quiet darkness and the feeling of someone watching me. And sometimes I still wonder what might have happened if I had stepped outside that tent instead of looking through the zipper.